Welcome back to the Bet4Golf DFS show here at none other than Bet4Golf.com. As always, I'm your host, John Daigle, and for today's two-man show, a pick and roll podcast, he is PGA Splits 101 on Twitter, none other than the great Ron Kloss. Ron, how are you feeling fresh off of a major?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of a, hangover, I guess, coming off that major. And at the end of major season signals every year, right, John?
The end of golf, basically?
Football is in the air. So, we've got the 3M, we've got Wyndham, we've got the playoffs, and then, pretty much golf season is over. We have a handful of events in the fall, the Ryder Cup, obviously. And then next year, it's just really crazy because it's kind of like the entire future of golf is kind of in the balance. There's no schedule even out yet for next year. And so really interesting to see, what happens with the whole LIV PGA Tour and how that all comes together.
Well, a lot to get to in the short term because this week is a fun field of players for the 3M Open. And I've read through your course preview, available for everyone for free on the site. What do you think are some key takeaways and what we should be targeting at this course for DFS lineups?
Yes, I mean, first of all, just on the course really quick, it's not your typical Parkland course. You have 27 different bodies of water that are kind of spread throughout the property. Looks more like a Florida course than it does one up north in Minnesota. So par 71, 7,431 yards, so pretty long. It's pretty flat, features bent grass fairways and greens, and it has one of the highest birdie rates on tour, but it also has one of the highest double bogey or worse rates. And that is, of course, because of the 13 holes that have water danger. And actually, last year, the course played 0.44 strokes over par because the course was firmer and there were gusty winds, kind of up to 20 miles per hour each round. So just a little background there. And then, like you said, with this being the 10th longest course on tour, combined with the premium that is placed on accuracy off the tee, thanks to 9 holes that have water trouble off the tee, kind of landing zones. Players that are strong in total driving are going to have a huge edge this week. And that's kind of evidenced by, you look at some of the past winners here, Tony Finau last year, Cameron Champ, even going back to Matthew Wolff, the first year of this event, all 3 of those guys, really strong off the tee. And so when you throw in kind of the importance of gaining strokes on approach, TPC Twin Cities rates as one of the most ball striking heavy courses on tour with 59% of total strokes gained coming in that category. And, also of note, the temperatures in Minnesota have been scorching hot, but they did get almost 2 inches of rain last night. And so the course is playing very soft. And so it looks like it might be more gettable than it was last year.
Are you prioritizing distance? As you mentioned, we both want accuracy off the tee, especially for a water-laden course. But in my DFS model on the site, I have a lot of players popping who are accurate but not power hitters. Do you think the length of this course will actually benefit distance hitters?
Yeah, I think you're always looking for both. I think the total driving stat is, the key one where it kind of takes that average of accuracy and distance. And, there's not many players who are strong on both. Like you have Cameron Young, you have Ludwig Aberg, and you have a few others maybe, but it's hard to find players strong on both. And so I think accuracy for me, I weighted it. If you're looking at those two, accuracy about 65%, distance about 35%. So definitely favoring accuracy.
Okay, that's good to know before we dive in. So with that being said, let's jump in to these tiers of players on DraftKings. And at the top, only 4 players in the 5-digit salary range. Cameron Young, 10-9, leading the field. Tony Finau, 10-6. Sung J M at 10-3. And Hideki Matsuyama, 10K. I think right now, Tony Finau will be the highest rostered of these 4, but your thoughts and anyone stand out of this tier?
Yeah, so, and I was thinking about this before the show, like just a little strategy thought. So, this week to me is a perfect example of a wide open tournament just because of the volatility and the variance with the water. Anytime a course has an easy hit rate of both fairways and greens, the gap between the best and worst players kind of gets shrunk because everybody's hitting fairways, everybody's hitting greens. You combine this with the field being weaker, and then you have this water danger, and you kind of have the perfect setup for some extreme randomness. And kind of what I love about this DraftKings slate this week is there's so much boom or bust potential with so many of these players. And so, for example, like you said with Tony Finau, you could start a lineup with Tony Finau, and then you could have Justin Thomas and Tom Hoagie and go with those three as a core. I mean, those three have so much win equity, enormous upside, yet their ownership right now, and I'm seeing Tony Finau at only 13%, so I think he might be a little lower owned than people expect. But if you just had Finau, JT, and Hoagie, that's 28% ownership. I mean, that's enormous leverage along with upside. So, another thing is you could bottom out your lineups with that same type of upside. So, for example, we'll get to these guys, but you take an Adam Svensson, Sam Bennett, Davis Thompson, who are in that lower 7K range, and you could, again, acquire that upside from the bottom of your lineup as well. So this week is kind of all about finding that upside for me. And so, I think there's some chalky guys up here, especially in that upper 9K range that I'm going to be taking more of a stand on this week because, anybody can have a blow-up hole on this course. And, you could have a triple bogey and you could be, just on the edge of making the cut, right from the start. So, but yeah, getting back to the top here, Cam Young is my play this week. I think when you look at he had this 2-month period where he struggled between April and June. But he has kind of emerged here back into the ball striking, dominant off the tee, savant that we saw him kind of last year rise to the top 15 player in the world. You look at last week, even at the Open, where he gained a staggering almost 17 strokes ball striking last week. Week before that, tournament before that, he finished 6th at the John Deere. And so he switched balls back to the, the golf ball that he used last year where he had all this success. And I don't think that's a coincidence either. And so, getting back to the whole total driving, when you look at his combination of accuracy and distance, I think he's a perfect fit to kind of combat the water hazards that are here at TPC Twin Cities. So he's the guy that I feel the most comfortable with up top. I will play Finau, like I said, just because of the upside. I know another angle this week is motivation. Not only do you have FedEx Cup points on the line, but with a guy like Finau, he's got the motivation trying to make a Ryder Cup team. So, it's always hard to measure, how much motivation, how much you can actually weigh that into a model or whether you're going to play guys or not. But I don't see, Tony Finau missed the cut in Detroit. I don't see that happening, again this week, especially coming off a miscut at the Open. So, he knows it's time to turn it around. And I think he's very comfortable in this environment here in Minnesota. This is where he turned it around last year. And then I think Sung J M is kind of the safer play up here. He's also kind of emerging from some struggles. He's trending back upwards. He finished 20th at the Open last week. He's got 3 top 30s in his last 4. His irons are back. He also has course history here. He's got a 15th and a 2nd on this course. He's always strong off the tee, and he kind of brings consistency with the upside of winning this week. And so, if I had to rank these guys up here, I'm going Young number 1, Sung J M number 2, Finau 3, and I will be completely fading Hideki here. I just don't know what he has to gain by being here, coming across overseas, back to America after last week. We had a good finish at the Open, but 19% ownership, at 10K, I just don't see him finishing, he's going to have to finish top 5, to pay off that price. So he's going to be a pass for me this week.
It is possible to get both Cam Young and Tony Finau in your lineups as well. You have to fade the 9K and 8K range, but I've tinkered with some lineups. You can do it, especially as we point out some lower 7K players we are both on in this wide open field. Moving on to the 9K range, you've already talked about a handful of them, but we have Emiliano Grillo at 9.7, Emiliano at 9.7, Sepp Straka on a heater at 9.5, Aberg 9.4, Justin Thomas 9.3, Gary Woodland 9.2, and Stefan Jaeger at 9.1, and Cam Davis 9K. So what are you doing here in the 9K range? And let's start with Justin Thomas, since you already mentioned him at the top.
Yeah, there's so many reasons not to play him. Like, you could make a list full, but for me, I see single digit ownership, right around 9%, 10%, maybe getting up there. But, for me, this is solely a play, kind of on pedigree, upside, even looking at the FedEx Cup point. Forget about the Ryder Cup he's trying to make. He's not even in the FedEx Cup playoffs yet. And so, he's kind of grinding here away at all these courses he's never played before. He had a really good second round in Detroit after a horrible first round. Kind of the same thing happened at the Open, where he had a horrible first round, shot in the 80s, and then he comes back, actually shot under par in the second round. And so I don't think, and I kind of agree with him in his press conference, I don't think he's that far off. I think he's just making some silly mistakes. I think his around the green play, which is usually tremendous, has kind of struggled, recently. And so, I think at 9,300, when he's surrounded by, even just below him, Gary Woodlands, Steven Yeager, I mean, they're not in the same class as him. And so for me, that's enough for me to play him. If he's going 10%, I'll try to double the field and get up to 20. I know it's risky. I know it leaves a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth who are staying far away from him, but I just think the leverage opportunity to play him is too strong this week. I'm fading two guys on the top of this range. I think Grillo and Straka, when both of these guys are approaching 19%, Grillo's the one who I may sneak in a few lineups just with kind of my core, just to cover my bases, because he has really turned it around with the putter. Everybody kind of knows he's one of the best ball strikers in the world, but he really has gotten hot with the putter and looks like he's fixed some things in that area. And he's got amazing course history here, with a couple, top fives. Straka's a guy who I just think, like you said, he's on a heater for sure, with the first and the second. But I just think coming back overseas from England, back here to America, I just think, when you're in contention in last two events, like, you're going to hit a wall eventually. You just can't keep up that pace. And he's not a guy who has a consistent history either. And so, I definitely could stay on the heater, but when we're talking ownership that high, when he's priced above some other guys, like, I'll get to Aberg here, but I just think for me, this is a week I'm going to take a couple stands, and Grillo and Straka are two of those that I'm going to fade. But yeah, Aberg is a guy who, if you look at his young history, he's already one of the best players off the tee on tour. Mm-hmm. His distance, his accuracy, his total driving, and he's shown he can gain strokes in all four areas. So I'm going to look past his miscut at the Scottish Open, which was his kind of the first miscut he's had this year. Finished fourth at the John Deere, and I just think the upside he brings to this course off the tee, I don't have any concerns about him, with water balls or any of that stuff. He's just so steady. So, for me, it's Aberg, it's Thomas, and I'll drop down. Cam Davis is another guy who I think coming in 13% right now. I think this is his type of course. He plays very well in the Midwest. He's typically strong distance-wise. The water scares me a little bit with him because he can get wild at times. But I just think Cam Davis has more upside than a Woodland or a Yeager, even a Hadwin below him. And so, again, like I said, I'm all about upside this week, and I think Cam Davis would be my third favorite play in the 9K range. And
you don't think Aberg catches a lot of ownership? Because that's my concern with him.
Yeah, no, Aberg is up there. I see him right 19, 20%. But again, if I'm playing him with JT, if I'm playing him with the Cam Davis, even if I'm pairing Finau with Aberg, that's already bringing my ownership down. And there's a bunch of plays kind of in the 7K range that are pretty low owned as well that I'm going to pair them with. So I think, again, we've talked about this before, but Aberg is an example of good chalk this week. Okay, so keep that in mind. Anyone listening, getting unique around Aberg, who is a good play, but will be high rostered. Moving on to the 8Ks, curious who stands out to you. Adam Hadwin at 8.9, JJ Spawn 8.8, Thigala 8.7, Keith Mitchell 8.6, Patrick Rogers back in our lives at 8.5, JT Poston 8.4, Mark Hubbard 8.3, Lucas Glover, who will absolutely be high rostered at 8.2, Vincent Norman 8.1, and Bo Hostler 8K. Yeah, that lower 8K range is very popular. I mean, when you look at, Hubbard and Glover, even Vincent Norman's getting up there. So yeah, I'm focusing a little bit more on the top part here. So Adam Hadwin, I think, who's right around 14%, 15. I think he's one of the safer plays on the board. And so he might be one who I do seek a little bit of safety in, because I do think he could have been priced much higher. He's a guy who typically keeps the ball in the fairway. He's gained on approach in 5 straight starts. He was just runner-up at the Rocket Mortgage. He has the second best course history here with 2 top 6 finishes. So I think Hadwin's a really good safe play at that upper 8K range. And then I'm dropping down a little bit to Keith Mitchell, who's a guy who I think has struggled recently. But for me, what I look at with Keith Mitchell is he's still a top 5 off the tee player in the world. Like, that's his thing. I think he's first or second. I don't know. He might have dropped a little bit because at this point in the year, but he's typically in the top 5 total driving. And I think, honestly, he's the most talented player in this range. He was just 20th at the U.S. Open, coming in at 8% ownership. So I really love Keith Mitchell this week, kind of banking on the fact that, he kind of turns it around this week. Some interest in Patrick Rogers, just finished runner-up last week. Probably should have won that event at the Barracuda. But he's another guy, strong off the tee, streaky putter, can get really hot on the greens. So you got these 2 guys, Mitchell and Rogers, here right in the middle, who, are both right around 8%. So, that's what I'm leaning towards. And then going down to the bottom, nobody really excites me down here. I'm not going to ever play Mark Hubbard at 8,300. He's a safe play, but again, if I'm looking for upside, I'm not going to get much upside from Mark Hubbard. And Lucas Glover does, obviously, I'm really impressed. He's probably the hottest player coming in with, I think he's got 3 top 6s in a row. Mm-hmm. But, 19, 20%, I can't play Lucas Glover because as much as he's gotten better with his putter, like, you just never know when that's going to, raise its ugly head again. And so I'd like to see it a little bit more from Glover before I start playing him at, 20%.
And it is only 3-4 tournaments ever since he changed his putter that he got hot. And yes, I agree with you because he stands out in my model as well. But even in higher stakes, I think his ownership gets higher. I think we're talking like 25% and mid to high stakes single entry. So I just don't think you can play him honestly into that kind of ownership at a wide open field. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Anyone else that you would fade in this 8K tier outside of Glover?
Yeah, like you said, definitely fading Hubbard. I think JT Poston typically doesn't play well the week after a major. That was something I saw in my, week after major data. I think Theegala is just a little too wild off the tee for a place like this. He's also missed both cuts at this event. I think JJ Spawn is interesting just because, off the tee is his strong suit. But again, when I see JJ Spawn priced more than a Keith Mitchell, than a Patrick Rogers, it's just hard for me to go up to him at that price. So for me, it's pretty much Hadwin, Mitchell, Rogers, and that's about it.
Moving on to 7Ks, we will chop it in half because I want to make sure we touch on all of them just in case people do want to play 2 10K players to get unique. And that starts the top with Aaron Rai, 7.9, Nikolai Hojgaard at 7.9, Eric Cole, 7.8, Taylor Pendrith, 7.8, Alex Noren, 7.7, Ryan Fox, 7.6, Cam Champ, 7.6, John Suh, 7.6, Tom Hoagie, 7.5, Bezaden Hoot, Matt Kuchar, and Austin Eckroat also sitting at 7.5. Your initial thoughts at the top there?
Yeah, this whole 7K range is absolutely loaded this week. Mm-hmm. I think with this weaker field, I'm not saying I would do this, but because you'd have so much salary left over, but you could literally make a lineup of 6 guys just right here. I think there's enough upside, consistency that you could do something like that. But just at the top, Aaron Rai, and there's some guys. When we get to Rai, Eric Cole, very popular. So I think getting unique up top, mixing these guys with the Tony Finau, with the Justin Thomas, I think that's ways to get different. But I'm definitely playing Rai. He finished 5th overall in my model this week. Still searching for his first PGA Tour victory, but again, he has 2 recent top 10s. He's gained over 6.5 strokes on approach in 3 of his last 6 starts. He ranks as the 4th best tee to green player in this entire field over the past 36 starts. And his weakness, putting, he's actually gained putting in 3 of his last 4. So I think his pinpoint accuracy off the tee is what kind of bodes really well for his chances to contend this week. You drop down here to Eric Cole, 7,800. Week in and week out, he continues to pop in pretty much every model that I run. This week he finished 8th overall, and he has struggled a bit off the tee. Now, a lot of that is distance-wise. He's not a long player. Struggled a little bit with accuracy too, which does scare me a little bit. But if you look at his best finish ever on tour, he finished runner-up at PGA National, which is very similar to this course because of all the water holes. And again, if you look at him from fairway to hole, so approach, around the green, putting, he's the best player in this entire field if you take away off the tee. So, his irons have kind of stayed hot all year. He's one of the most consistent putters on tour. He's another guy who's popular, 16%. But I think just excellent value. He easily could have been priced in the 8K range. I think Taylor Pendrith is interesting at 7,800. Is another guy with kind of extreme upside. He always seems to play better in the summertime down the stretch. He's got consecutive top 15s coming in here. He's gained 8 strokes ball striking in both of those starts. Very streaky putter, loves bent grass. Going down the board here, I think Justin Suh. Maybe his upside might be limited a little bit, but he is just a consistent cut maker. He's always in the running. Probably maybe the best putter in this field. I think Ryan Fox, you just keep going down this list here. I think he could have been priced in the 8K range. His tendency to get wild off the tee is what's going to have me playing him less than I'd like to, just because of, that's one thing he does struggle with a little bit. But his overall consistency, whether he's playing on the DP World Tour, whether he's playing in a major, made another cut at the Open last week. Cameron Champ, 7,600, talk about boom or bust. He's struggled so much this year on tour, but he's made his last 2 cuts. And of course, he won here 2 years ago. He finished 16th here last year. And when we're talking Cameron Champ, as much as he struggles, approach, around the green, putting at times, off the tee is his strength. One of the longest players on tour, one of the most accurate players off the tee. So I think just based on that alone, when I see him coming at 6-7%, I'm definitely going to try to get a little bit higher than that. And then Austin Eckroat, he's kind of in the midst of the best stretch of his career. He's got 8 made cuts in his last 9 starts, including 2 top 10s, top 5 ball striker in this field, very consistent off the tee. And another intriguing thing about him is that his home course in Oklahoma, it's called Oak Tree National. When I looked it up, it's very similar to TPC Twin Cities. There's water everywhere. It's a P-dye course. There's all these risk-reward holes. And so, he's played here at TPC Twin Cities once. He finished 16th back in 2021. And so I think he's going to be very comfortable here just because of those similarities. And then I'll finish with our guy, Tom Hoagie, sitting down here in the mid 7K range once again. Finished 4th here last year. Showed a little bit of life overseas, making the cut. I believe he made the cut at the Scottish Open. But I just think he's a guy who, as much as he's struggled recently, again, coming in at 5% right now, he's still a top 50 player in the world. And so, again, he's a guy I'm willing to take a risk on with his irons getting hot, with his putter getting hot. And again, he's a Midwest guy, from North Dakota. And so, I think that's another narrative this week. Some of these guys that just tend to play well in these northern courses. So I think he's a guy with extreme upside this week.
As we get into the bottom half of the 7K range, this is where I get really intrigued, because I think the only player we are really worried about in terms of catching a lot of ownership would be Doug Ghim at 7-4. Otherwise, I like sprinkling in a lot of these guys. I think Peter Quest actually has win equity, unless you are trying to talk me out of it otherwise, because just to be, over the last 6 months, 8th in this field in strokes gained off the tee and number 1 in both bogey avoidance, which is important for skipping out on those 3-putt opportunities at this course, and also number 1 in driving distance in that span as well. His peripherals really match what I think we're looking for here at this course. So love Quest at 7-4. I'm all over Kevin Yu at 7-1, also top 12 in driving distance among this field. But in terms of good drive percentage, 16th over the last 6 months as well, 6th in strokes gained off the tee off that time. So again, another terrific distance hitter with his driver. And then MJ DeFew also pops for me as just a good putter as well. In terms of greens and regulation from the rough, just in case he is a little wobbly, he's 12th in this field in the last 50 rounds for that, and 12th in strokes gained putting. So those are three players, at least for me in the lower 7Ks, that I think I'll have a lot of around Doug Gim instead of Doug Gim. What about you?
Yeah, so just talking about ownership, the two highest guys down here, like you said, Doug Gim coming in at 13%, and I have Ches Reavie at 12% also, because he has been really consistent lately. He's a fairway finder. He's not going to find the water. So, yeah, I think Reavie is an interesting play. Reavie is someone who I will play, just kind of looking for that safety, kind of as kind of the last guy in my lineup type of player. I'm out on Doug Gim. Now, Gim has been on a pretty impressive stretch lately. But again, when I see him getting up to 13%, and I see an Adam Svensson, who's my favorite player in this range, right there at 7,400, who's coming in at 5%, who's actually won on tour this year. And so, yeah, with Svensson, I think he's got the winning upside. He's another guy, and that's kind of another narrative, guys who have been struggling, but who are kind of trending up over the last couple of starts that they played. So finished 21st at the John Deere, where he gained in all four areas. And again, you look at some course comps for TPC Twin Cities, again, PGA National, Svensson finished 9th there. TPC Sawgrass, another course with tons of water, Svensson was 13th there. So kind of these water-intensive courses, he ranked pretty high in my water danger rankings that I put together. And again, he's another guy who's really good off the tee, streaky putter, and those are the kind of, two of the things I'm also looking for this week. So Peter Quest, just to cover with him. Now, I did look at him, and initially, you would think, 4th at the Rocket Mortgage, and he's 17th at the John Deere. But then we had these two alternate events, and this is what took me off of him. Mm-hmm. He missed the cut at the Barbasol, and then at the Barracuda, which, again, many people didn't follow last week, he finished 59th and was a very weak field. And so, when I see a guy like this who had a really good stretch, really under the radar, and then now people are kind of playing him more. And I see him maybe dropping these last two events, struggling a little bit, maybe coming back to earth. So that's kind of what threw me off him. So I think you would definitely play Svensson over Quest in a vacuum. Yes, for sure. Okay. And just because, when you see back-to-back starts like that, that's a red flag to me. Especially in such a weak field. And so you coming in, you're throwing some water into the mix this week. He's played this course once before, a couple of years ago, missed the cut. So, yeah, and then I even like Garrick Higgo more, too, because, with Higgo right at 7,400, driver is his best weapon, which, of course, matters here. He's another guy who's trending back upwards. He's got 3 straight top 35s. He kind of thrives on these easier courses. And so I like Higgo at 7,400. I think Lee Hodges might be the most under-the-radar player in this entire range, though. Got 4 top 30s his last 6. Finished 12th at the Scottish. He's gained ball striking in 8 of his last 12 events. Also, his putter's improving. So I think Lee Hodges is a guy to kind of watch for here, as we get into the latter part of the year. Even moving into next year is a guy who I think is going to make a jump. And then kind of going down, like there's so many guys, like you said, you could very easily sprinkle. I think Sam Bennett sitting right there again, only 7,200. What's the thing Sam Bennett does best? He finds fairways. He's not really long, but he's really accurate off the tee. And again, if you can just find the fairway, you're going to at least be in position to have success here. You're not going to worry about the double bogeys, or the bogeys from the ball going into the water. And so I think that alone, along with his upside, coming in at 3-4%, sign me up for Sam Bennett all day. And then you got a couple more interesting plays down here. You got, Kevin Yu has kind of been another boomer bust guy. He's either finishing top 10 or he's missing the cut, which again, we're talking this low range. I'm going to take some chances on guys here like that. And then you look right next to him at Ben Griffin, more of a safe play. Showed some signs of life recently. Played decent overseas. He barely missed the cut at the Scottish Open. But I think he's a guy who was shown earlier in the year. He played really good in elevated events. And so I like Ben Griffin. And then Davis Thompson is a guy who 7,100, We saw what he did earlier in the year at the Amex when he went head-to-head with John Rahm, finished runner-up. His strength off the tee combined with the streaky putter. He finished the last 2 events, 2 straight made cuts, 24th at the Rocket, 31st at John Deere. He eats up the par 5s. And so I really like Davis Thompson kind of as a scorer who has enormous upside, I think. Maybe not to win, but top 10, top 20. I really like him at 7,100. And honestly, there's a few guys we'll get to here in the 6K that I'll bring up, but he's kind of the bottom for me here. And I don't think you need to get much lower just because there's so many guys here in the 7K range that you can kind of spread it around and load up on.
And more importantly, pivot off of Doug Gim just to make sure we avoid that ownership. I actually, as you talk about the 6Ks, I only have one play that stands out to me, honestly, and it's CT Pan. I don't know his ownership at 6,900, and he's not distance. But if we are avoiding distance and just trying to factor in play from both off the tee and the fairway, again, last 6 months, 14th in this field and good drive percentage. So the rate of ball within inches of the fairway, but then also making par, saving par from it. And then, as you wrote in your preview, 46% of shots come from roughly 175 yards out, and he's been 34th in this field in a proximity to the hole from 150 to 175. So if you're not looking for distance, if you're willing to sacrifice that stat, I think CT Pan's a good play. But who else at 6K for you?
Yeah, Pan does have the highest ownership. It's not high, but 7%. So yeah, people are seeing that in Pan, his accuracy. So for me, so the few guys, I think Carson Young, 6,800, he continues to, finish top 40, making cuts, which is, again, all you need down here. I think he does have a little bit of upside as well. Ryan Gerard has really started to turn it on. He's also 6,800. He's made 5 of his last 6 cuts. He just finished 5th at the Barracuda. He's really strong on approach. I think Joel Damon is another guy, perfect example of a guy who has upside, a guy who's been playing pretty bad. But again, you look, Joel Damon just finished, I believe, 10th at the Barracuda. So kind of down here, you're trying to grasp onto anything you can. And, we know Joel Damon has that upside. For whatever reason, he's had a really bad year. But I think there's always that hope that maybe this, is the week that he can turn it around. And so at this low of a price, I'm willing to take that chance on a guy like him. Pat Kazire, who has another guy who's really struggled, has missed a lot of cuts recently. Played here 4 times. He's made all 4 cuts. So that's what I'm looking at this week. And I think he's a guy who does have, some really good scoring upside as well. But outside of that, there's a few cases I can make for, an Eric Van Rooyen, who's 6,600. Of course, the story is going around with his caddy actually qualified into the field this week. But Van Rooyen, he's played this course maybe more than anyone. He's a local product from the University of Minnesota. And so, he's interesting to maybe a dart throw. Bryce Garnett actually has top 5 course history here, 6,500. So he's a guy who I'll throw in a few lineups. Kevin Roy, he plays on these waterlogged courses all the time near his home course in Florida. He's one of the best approach players in this field, actually. So I think he's interesting. And I'll leave you with this. Okay, 6,100. Guy has made 8 cuts in a row. Soon you'll know that he will be in plenty of my lineups because I think at 6,100, he's a safe play. I would have priced him closer to 68, 69. I think he's not going to get you anywhere near the top 20. But I just think if you're just looking, you want to stack 5 guys, in the 8 and 9K range, you want to build a bunch of upside, and you're looking for that one guy who could get you just made the cut. I think Sung Yul No at 6,100, I think he kind of presents that safety, and at 6,100, you can't beat that price.
It can't be any worse than Byron and I both playing Ernie Els last week after he was 10 over after day 2. So yeah, I like the strategy to dip down that far. Okay, let's end with your favorite way to play this week, your favorite strategy and how you want to build lineups, whether it be, for me, for instance, 2 10K players. That's how I want to get unique here. And then dipping to the lower 7Ks, not Doug Gim, and 6Ks. So your favorite way to play, and then your 2 flag plants under 8K?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to be using different strategies this week. I think it is very viable, though, to go with 2 guys from the top. I can see, Cameron Young, Sung J M, but what I probably will do even more so is pair one of those top guys with either an Aberg or a Thomas. Have an Aberg and a Thomas be my second guy in the lineup, because that leaves you with kind of that mid to upper 7K range, and you could really spread it around from there. And you can get a little up to around 15. But yeah, that's something I like to do, even throw in Keith Mitchell. So there's different ways I'm going to go about that. But as far as under 8K, if we're looking at trying to avoid ownership, just strictly upside, I think Tom Hoagie, 75. I'm willing to take that chance in this week, and just hope and pray that, he actually doesn't find the water and he hits his irons like he's capable of. And then if you're looking for a guy who's maybe a little more chalky, I think Eckroat's the guy for me, right at that mid 7K range. Just his, has a good finish here already. I think the course fits his eye based on his home course in Oklahoma. I think he's been playing really well. And so he would be my other guy here.
I like Byron's fellow South African MJ DeFew and Kevin Yu as my 2 favorite players, but I will also have a lot of Sam Bennett, as you mentioned, and I think you talked me onto Adam Svensson. I know I made the question 2 players, but I think I really like that core group around Gim. And finally, what is your favorite bet for the 3M Open?
I would have to go with, I think Ludwig Aberg has just great upside this week. And so I got a couple days ago, top 30, which, is more of a safe play. I probably could have taken a top 20 easily, but plus 100, you're still getting plus money for a top 30 off Aberg. So I like him. And even just, going down, like Eric Cole, top 40, plus 105. So I'm a little more conservative when it comes to those, just trying to play it a little safer. But yeah, I could easily see both of those guys finishing top 10, top 20 if you want to get a little more aggressive.
As Ryan Noonan pointed out for free on the site for everyone, his FanDuel finishing position parlay, Sung JM and Sepp Straka, both who we talked about, T40 at FanDuel together for plus 122. You can read the rest of his outrights on the site. What else do you have, everyone, before lineup locks in the morning coming out?
Yeah, so we have our typical office hours coming up here at 4:30, so in about 20 minutes. So if you have any other DraftKings betting questions, feel free to join that if you're in the Discord. Ownership for DraftKings will be posted here in the next hour, and first round leader, all the other stuff. Looking forward to not having to stay up all night and getting some sleep this week finally.
Although it was fun, it was a very tiring weekend. I agree. And my DFS model already created with all the rankings on the site for everyone. If you want to parse through that tool and see which stats I believe matter most for this course, for DFS anyways, as well. So until next week, when we're all back together, Byron will be back from vacation and biking thousands of miles. Remember, be a little bit kinder than what's required. We'll see you then.